Hey everybody, Eric Grenier here with Philippe J. Fournier for this week's episode of The Numbers. Philippe, how are you doing today?
Good morning, Eric. It's good to see you. You know what? I think I said this last week. Flowers are blooming. It's a very nice week in Montreal. Warm weather for the first time since the fall. And no election to cover. And my college semester is almost over. So, yeah, it feels like pre-vacation right now. But there's still lots going on in Ottawa. We even have some polling about the provinces that we'll have to talk about. What about you, Eric? How are you?
I'm good. I am now in Percé, in the Gaspésie, and here it is a nice balmy 6, feels like 0. There are no leaves on the trees, but it's coming. It's coming. Spring takes a little bit longer here, so that's okay.
Good for you.
But yeah, there's been a little bit of news over the last little while. Now, we do want to talk a bit about this discussion about Western separation, Alberta, Saskatchewan, mulling referendums, and we got some new polling data on that. We're going to dive into those numbers. But first, Philippe.
Yeah.
What's happening in Terrebonne?
I know, right? Ugh. So, by the way, I did have messages of people telling me, hey, the record page on 338. Like you said, Terrebonne was going to the block, so you have to, put one down. Like, yeah, no, I haven't got around to it, so I go from 299 correct winners to 298 because of Terrebonne by a single vote.
I don't know why you didn't see it. I mean,
didn't you have Terrebonne going to the block as a toss-up too?
Yeah, I did, but that's. I mean, I have excuses. So yeah, Terrebonne.
Yeah.
So first it was a block win.
Yeah. First it was a Liberal win.
First it was a Liberal win. Then there was validation of the results, which then pushed it over to the bloc. Then there was a judicial recount.
Yep.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, the gap had been 43 votes in favor of the bloc. Now the gap is 1 vote in favor of the Liberals. So after that judicial recount, the Liberals are up now to 170. And they won it by single vote. How many votes were cast in Terrebonne? Something like
60,000, just over 60,000. Yeah,
1 vote.
I know
made the difference. Oh my God!
I received so many like copy pasted of links to curb your enthusiasm jokes. You didn't vote, so that bloc voter couple that says, oh well, we don't have time today to vote, and well, there you go. There's
got to be one relative of one of those of the Liberal MP who did not vote. At least one friend, one relative. Oh, what a crushing kind of result there. Sorry for one bloc relative that didn't go out to vote, but anyway, just 1 vote. Now we do still have a few more recounts going on. So today, Monday, there's a recount in Terra Nova, the Peninsulas, which was decided by a comparatively very comfortable 12 votes.
12 times larger than Terrebonne.
And I mean, the last one just swung by 44 votes. So 12 votes is by no means, apparently, a safe margin. Milton East, Halton Hill South will be having a count on Tuesday. That was 29 votes. And then next week, there's one this one was not a mandated one. It was a requested one by the Liberals in Windsor-Tecumseh Lakeshore. There, the Liberals have requested a judicial recount. The gap was 77 votes in favor of the Conservatives. So if all of these fall in favor of the Liberals, they would only end up at 171. So the majority is not in play in these recounts. But yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens. It seems unlikely that it would flip at 77 votes, but
it matters locally. I get it, but in the grand scheme of things, as we said last week, does it matter if they have 168 or 170 or 169? It's a strongest of minority against two opposition parties that don't have leaders, a Bloc Québécois that is significantly weakened. Having the majority here, I think, would cause more problems than otherwise. I mean, the Liberals don't think that way, right? They want a majority and they want to have a majority on committees for the next 4 years. But having just short of a majority for the Liberals is just as good if they play their cards correctly. I know it matters locally, but in grand scheme of things, 170 or 171 or 169, come on, there's no difference, right?
Yeah, we're also going to one day get eaten up by the sun, so I guess none of it really matters that much at all. But no, I think you're right. I mean, the difference between this is not going to make a huge difference. There is those bragging rights, I suppose, that the Liberals would have won a majority versus a minority.
Exactly.
But I think you're right. This will effectively be the same. Give or take 5 MPs, it doesn't really matter that much when it's this close.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I'm very curious to see who the speaker is, because that'll have a huge impact as well. We do have a few other bits and bobs of news. So we have 2 interim leaders. One of them we've seen before, Andrew Scheer, back as the interim leader of the Conservatives. And Don Davies, got the short straw. He'll be the NDP's interim leader in the House. None of these are surprising. The fact that Don Davies has taken the interim leadership, more or less, if I'm not mistaken, rules him out as a permanent leadership candidate, which makes sense. I don't think he would have been seen as one of the front runners. For Andrew Scheer, I mean, he's someone who knows the job. He's done it before. And in the end, it's not going to matter too much. He'll probably be in the House for a couple of weeks at most, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know. This paradigm shift?
Thing is, what's interesting is when you look at the calendar for the by-election in the Alberta, what is it, Bell River, Crowfoot. So Politico had a very interesting stuff this morning, basically saying, Pierre Poilievre is not going to get in for a little while. I mean, it may not matter much, right? But at first I thought, okay, so elections on late April, then you wait 10 days, then you have a by-election of 36 days. That means that before Canada Day, Pierre Poilievre is in the House of Commons. Maybe I was mistaken. There are many more steps. So first, the writs have to be back on the desk of the Chief Electoral Officer. Then it has to be published in the Canada Gazette. And then he has to wait 30 days for resignation. I'm talking about Monsieur...
Kirk.
What's his name? Sorry?
Damien Kirk.
That's it, Damien Kirk. And then we have to declare the vacancy, and then you have to call a by-election that's at least 36 days. So that means that the by-election will probably be in mid-August for Pierre Poilievre. And maybe you knew all this because you know procedures more than I do, but I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of late. So Pierre Poilievre will be back for the fall sitting, basically. He's not going to be back for a little while.
And I mean, the House is probably going to come back for a couple of weeks in May and then lift probably in mid-June, which is usually what happens. So in the end, he's going to miss a month of sittings. And it's a month where nothing much is going to happen in terms of, those parliamentary battles. Sure, there'll be the throne speech and the return and the response to it. Maybe they'll come in with some sort of budget or that kind of thing. But it's not like the Conservatives were going to try to engineer the defeat of the government in the next month. No. So, for Andrew Scheer to be there, as I mentioned, he's done the job before. He knows procedure in the House of Commons very well because he used to be the Speaker of the House. I guess it's just a bit of an interesting choice considering that he is a former leader. Occupying the chair again.
I guess it's a sign like he's not gonna go for leader again. As it is the case with Don Davies, when you accept the post of interim leader is because you're not challenging to be leader. Thing is, we already knew that. I don't think Mr. Scheer would win a leadership race if there was a leadership race in the Conservative ranks. And he's very well liked in Conservative circles. So the only surprise was that, this is a former leader, as you said. The thing is, I'm not sure maybe I'll push back on this, that there won't be anything of high importance. I mean, there was not a budget, right? In the spring because of the progression and the election, there has to be a budget.
Right.
And so that's kind of big. And of course, the Conservatives will not vote down. The government will not fall on this budget, obviously. But, it looks like Mr. Carney wants to move fast on some files. And as you should, like as a politician, you know that your best time to move fast is early on in your first mandate. And this is his first mandate. But just to go back to what you said about Don Davies, I mean, he's one of the 7 remaining NDP MPs. So just by having survived this wave against NDP, I thought he would run for the leadership. He would be at least one of the one considered. But were you surprised, Eric, that it seems that the MPs, the caucus of the NDP, the leftovers of the caucus, was not made aware of this? Léa Gazan tweeted, "Oh, it's so nice to learn that Don Davies is now the interim leader through the media." I was like, okay, this is strange. I thought the caucus had a say in this. I guess I'm ignorant, but
I'm not sure what the rules are for the NDP in terms. I guess it was something that would be decided outside. I mean, if you 7 people is not a lot to get in touch with.
Yeah,
probably take the phone call and be done within 15 minutes with the whole caucus. It's not a great start. No. And I mean, there is going to be a lot of pressure, I think, on a lot of NDP MPs to potentially cross the floor to the Liberals, to give them that majority. I don't think any of them will probably do it, but it doesn't really help matters when you have this kind of internal caucus management. I mean, it's when it is only 7. I mean, you can all get in the minivan and go somewhere together. You got to be friends. You got to work together because I mean,
have to. Yep.
You lose one, and suddenly your caucus has been cut by what 15% or so. So I mean, they need to probably have a nice team meeting. Go out and have a picnic, all on the same blanket, and they can become friends again. But yeah, I don't know. I'm very curious to see what's going to happen with the leadership race. We're going to do a special episode later this week. Yes, we're going to do an NDP leadership draft. Which big names are going to go first? But we see some discussion about whether it should be a short race or a long race, that kind of thing.
What do you think? What do you think?
I don't think a long race is a good idea. When you look at the Quebec Liberals who haven't had a leader for years, I don't think they should have no leader for years. I don't think they should have a very long race in the sense of, a year-long contest, which I think is over the top. I mean, the Liberals showed you can do it pretty quickly. Probably don't need to do it that fast.
Yeah.
You need to have enough time to get people to kind of get some money raised and get into it. But they should probably have a leader in place. If it was up to me, I would say by next spring. I don't think you want to have it drag on for more than a year.
Yeah, well, the Quebec Liberal example is an extreme one, right? Almost 3 years after the election, you change leaders. I mean, that's a bit extreme, but also you want to have time for good people to show up, right? I'm not sure any of the sitting MPs will want the job. I mean, perhaps some of them should, but so Don Davies is out. We won't do the draft here, but Boulris has indicated, Mr. Boulris and Rosemont Patry has indicated many times that he's not interested in a top job. So you go to Jenny Kwan, you go to Léa Gazan, who doesn't seem to be too fond right now of the parties are top brass. And also, if you vote for a leader that's outside the House, that means you're leader of a party that doesn't have much money and you don't have an MP salary. So maybe a longer race could be a good idea. I mean, next summer is not that long. It's not like the NDP has to rebuild, right? Mm-hmm. So a quick fix will not do it. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. We'll get there. We'll get there eventually. Also.
Yeah, and the electoral calendar does not really have anything that they should wait for. Often you would be waiting until a provincial election is over so that you can get maybe some of those people or get people who don't want to recommit.
Yeah.
But, if you look at the electoral calendar in the provinces where the NDP has a lot of strength, it's pretty far down the road, right? 2027, 2028. I don't think they should wait that long. With being such a small party, if they have to have Don Davies, for all the qualities he has, as the main face for the next 2 to 3 years, I think that will not work out well. It worked out for the Liberals back in 2011, 2013 to have an interim leader in place for 2 years because it was Bob Rae, right? Yeah. He was a well-known figure, could get a lot of profile. The NDP is going to need to have a lot of attention or it's just going to fade away. And they would probably need to have a leader in place. So we'll see what's going to happen there. But that'll be the next thing to follow. Okay. Alberta, Saskatchewan.
So interesting stuff from, there was 2 polls. So there was the Nanos poll, which was a small sample, but still interesting. But I think the poll you referred to is the Angus Street poll about Alberta and Saskatchewan independence and the feelings they have post-federal election. Eric, what stood out for you?
So what stood out? A couple of things. First, we should lay the groundwork here. All this is happening as a result of after the election. There's been discussion of a referendum on separation for both Alberta and Saskatchewan. Probably more discussion what's happening in Alberta because the Premier, Daniel Smith, has changed the threshold for getting a plebiscite put before the people so that the people who would be organizing for a referendum have fewer signatures that they have to get on the petition in a longer amount of time. And there is a lot of expectations that a referendum on separation from Canada will be included in a series of referendums that it seems the UCP is hoping to have next year on different issues. So we had this poll. There's two things that struck me. One, the numbers are maybe higher than you might have thought. But they're still very difficult for the sovereignist forces. But if it's the people who support the we in Quebec, what would this be? The yes, I guess would be the yes, but there must be a more fun Western way to say it.
Wexit? I mean, that's what they use. I mean, I know it's incomplete because BC and Manitoba are not even close. But Alberta exit, I can't Wexit.
Yeah, so, okay, we should go through the numbers. I think the main one that is the only one that, the main one that I'm interested in at first is the question, supposing Alberta does hold a referendum on secession, would you vote for your province to leave Canada or stay? So in Alberta, you had 19% who said definitely would vote to leave, 17% who said lean toward voting to leave. So combined, you have there 36% who say they definitely or would lean towards independence for Alberta. Then you have 8% who said lean toward voting to stay, and 52% who said definitely would vote to stay.
Yeah.
That to me is a bit of a hard bar for the independence forces to try to get to when you have already 52% commitment against.
Yeah.
And then just in Saskatchewan, you had 15% definitely would vote to leave, 18% would lean toward voting to leave. So again, you got 33%, 9% lead toward voting to stay, 49% definitely would vote to stay. Roughly similar numbers, right? We're talking roughly 60 to 65 against to 30 to 35 for.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
Okay. Well, many, but I have to tread lightly here because I want to be careful the words I choose. This fraction of voters who express desire for separation is high regarding the standards. We're used to see like 20-25% in Alberta in past polls. I know ResearchGo, Leger, Ipsos had polls about this in recent years. So 36 is higher, and this is right after the fourth straight victory of the Liberals, against the will of many Albertans. However, growing up in Quebec City in the 80s and 90s and having lived in Mount Montreal for most of my life, this is also light years away from being competitive, right? When we have a poll in Quebec that shows the yes side, the separation side, the sovereignty side, is around in the mid-30s, we say, ooh, that's a tough poll for the sovereignty camp, right? Because it's light years away from what you need. We know also, the only precedent we have in Canada is Quebec, so we use precedent, that saying, yes, I would vote to separate in a poll, and then to have 50% plus one voting yes on a secession in ballot boxes, that is light years away. That doesn't mean that federal politicians, or in this case also provincial politicians, should ignore it. We just don't toss it aside. It's a third of the population, a little more than a third. But also this is reactionary to the Liberals just winning a federal election. I would not be surprised if we poll this again in, let's say, September, that it's back down to 31 or 32, which is still sizable. No, don't get me wrong. But it's still a minority. This is my first thought, and before you interject here, I just want to say also, it's so interesting to me that those interested in Alberta separation, Alberta sovereignty, are only found among conservatives. Again, the comparison with Quebec here breaks down because we have left-leaning sovereigntists and we have right-leaning sovereigntists. And the difficulty of the Parti québécois, the main vehicle for Quebec sovereignty, has been to have all these people agree with each other. And it hasn't worked really well in recent decades. But these are all conservatives. I mean, broke down by vote intent at a provincial level. NDP voters in Alberta, so provincial NDP voters, 97% against separation. That's unanimous as it gets. So it's a problem for Canada to have to deal with this. It's also a problem for the Conservatives, because now Pierre Poilievre is going into an Alberta seat, a rural Alberta seat, where if we look at these numbers, we see that there are probably a lot of separatists in there. And Pierre Poilievre will have to deal with that.
Yeah, it is remarkable that you have a majority of supporters of both the UCP and the Sask party would vote in favor. I say there, or at least definitely, or would lean to. You did mention the thing about the fact that this is a reaction to the Liberals coming into power, and you have a question there. The Angus Reid Institute asked, suppose the Conservatives had won the federal election in April, how would this change how you feel about voting to leave Canada? Among those who said they would vote to leave, 72% say they would vote to stay at that point. So it really then cuts down that portion of the sovereignists in that 30 to 35% who actually are motivated to leave regardless of what's happening in Ottawa. It then gets cut down to a quarter of it. So we're talking at that point like 10, 15%, right?
Yeah.
That's what I find kind of interesting about this. And the comparisons to Quebec, I think, are relevant, is that, you know, you have how many? So the definitely would vote to leave is 15% Saskatchewan, 19% in Alberta. I think you've polled on this before.
Yes, I did.
What is the definitely would vote to leave, the committed sovereignist vote in Quebec?
It's the low to mid 20s. Like you have 23, 24% of the Quebec population, mostly francophones in the regions. Not all, but mostly. That say, whatever happens, I do not care who's in power in Ottawa, I want sovereignty. So it's barely a quarter of the population. Then you had maybe 10% of les souverainistes mou, soft sovereigntists. The comparisons with Quebec eventually break down. And as I said, you have Québec Solidaire, an officially sovereigntist party that gets 10 to 15% of the vote, that is resolutely left-wing. And you have right-wingers, conservatives, that would vote for sovereignty in Quebec. So it's across the spectrum. This is not what we're seeing right now in Alberta and to a lesser extent in Saskatchewan.
It is also very conditional, which I think is the opening that you have for Mark Carney and for federal. It's just weird to use the terminology, federalist forces in Alberta, especially if we start seeing them from conservatives. But you do see that the amount of people who say they would vote to leave gets reduced significantly once it's things like, what if the government repealed C-69? What if the government, forced a pipeline to get built here and there?
Yeah.
So you do kind of see that the motivation for separation among this chunk of voters is primarily political in terms and partisan in the fact that it's the Liberals that are governing in Ottawa, and also conditional on some things related to the oil and gas industry, that if the federal government was a little bit more open to it, that those forces would get undercut pretty seriously. And so I do think there is a significant opening there for Mark Carney. I don't think that he could follow, give all of the requests that Danielle Smith has made, but he can probably make enough ground going forward to kind of undercut a lot of this reaction to the election result. Because I think there is the perception, which we'll find out on Tuesday when the cabinet is sworn in, that this is, in Alberta, the continuation of really the Justin Trudeau government with a little bit of extra, bells and whistles. Will we see that it's the same kind of people running natural resources, environment, and as we had under Justin Trudeau, or is it new people that come in, right? There's an opportunity there, and I guess it's up to Mark Carney and the Liberals to grasp that opportunity, or if they're going to provide more fuel for the separatist flame in Alberta and give more energy to Danielle Smith, who is using this to try to get some of these concessions out of the federal government.
Interesting, though, that Danielle Smith, I saw the interviews that she gave, says she's not for the separation, but maybe she'll throw an olive branch. She extended an olive branch to those who are, and have that as a referendum. That seems so risky. I mean, it seems like the definition of party over country or party over province. But I understand when you look at these numbers, I understand where she's coming from. You look at, again, the sample sizes are not that great, but even if you include the estimated margin of error in there, a majority of UCP voters express in favor of separation. And when you look at the regional breakdown, so in Calgary, again, Calgary was split down the middle in the provincial election, NDP and UCP. 66% stay, 31% leave. That's 2-1. Edmonton, 67% stay, similar as Calgary, 29% leave. So again, 2-1. And then in the rest of Alberta, in the rural regions and the smaller cities, it's tied basically. 46% stay, 48% leave. So statistical tie there. Again, I go back to this. So when we break it down by age, by gender, by region, we see that the median Alberta sovereigntist is male, older, and living in the regions. And then Pierre Poilievre is going to get into a by-election there. And I keep going back to this because I'm trying to think of a comparison. Again, it's like if Jean Chrétien in the 90s ran into a super sovereigntist riding.
Yeah, ran into Lac Saint-Jean or something.
Yeah, exactly. You probably would have lost, but there's no question that Pierre Poilievre will win this by-election. But once he goes to, it's a large riding. He has to go to many smaller communities, and he has to go shake hands, and he has to meet the people there. Many of these people will express their desires, like we have to separate, we have to have independence. How will he react? How will he deal with this? Because he could use that as his advantage, but I'm not sure if he has the willingness to do that. He's been more of a guy to excite the base, not grow the base in the past years, and that's why he lost the election. Yeah,
he's going to have to.
That's such a,
It's a complicated one, right? Yeah. If he had decided to run anywhere else, like a Calgary or Edmonton riding, probably not that complicated. But as you said, when you have 82% was conservative, and the UCP does super well there, you're right. Likely you got at least a plurality, if not a majority, who might vote for separation. So Alberta Pierre Poilievre would have to answer and have a position on there. He can't take a soft position on it when you're trying to run to be the prime minister. But anyway, this is going to be a bouncing ball we're going to have to keep following, especially if it does get on the ballot. Can you imagine that we might have a referendum campaign in Alberta before Quebec even thinks about it? And we'll see how that's going to unfold. The one thing I ran some of the numbers. Alberta, rightly or wrongly, might say that it doesn't have a lot of influence on what happens in Ottawa, especially when it's a Liberal government. But Alberta has had a huge impact on the last few elections. If you take Alberta out of the equation, take all other seats, just toss them away.
Yeah.
The Liberals would have won a majority in this past election. They would have won one in 2021. I think they would have won one in 2019. So you would have had Justin Trudeau majority governments. You wouldn't have had Stephen Harper win a majority in 2011. And he wouldn't have won the most seats in 2006. So Alberta actually has had a huge impact on elections in Canada over the last little while. Yeah. Yes, they always send almost all Conservatives. But because of that, the Conservatives have won one election in 2006. They won a majority in 2011. And the Liberals were kept to a minority over the last couple of elections. So, Alberta has had a big say in what's happening in Ottawa, even if they haven't had their preferred party form the government.
It's going to be very interesting. And as I said, and I stress this, I know if people are watching us, they're like, look at this, a guy from Ottawa and a guy from Montreal talking about Western separation. I understand where they're coming from. And as I said earlier, and I want to state this again, we can't just ignore them. If you just toss them aside, it's a third of the population. You have to find a way to try to mend these differences, but at the same time say, well, they're also the problem of the Conservatives. Both things can be true. The Conservatives have to find a way to win elections. It's simple as that. They lost this one. You can't blame anybody else but themselves. You can't blame Trump, of course. It was a major factor in this, but it's not the straight line from Trump attacks Canada, therefore it's good for the Liberals. It's not a straight line. It was a curveball, basically. It's not like Conservatives are not patriotic. It's ridiculous. But it was the Conservatives' turn to win federally. They dropped the ball, they missed it, and we won't have election probably for 3 years at least. So they have to find a way to improve their lot everywhere. So.
Yeah, and internal divisions in their core province within their own supporter base is not something they need right now. Shall we do the number of the week?
Well, thing is, the number of the week was taken from this poll. Inger Street asked, "Do you expect such a referendum would pass or fail?" So basically, do you think that the referendum would be a winner? And among those who said they would leave, only 28% believed that it would pass. So that feels to me like a lot of people says, well, I would vote yes, but for more leverage, not for outright separation. That sounds a lot like Mario Dumont in 1995. So again, we have some parallels to make. But it's not going to be a boring... the next UCP General Convention, the one before the election, I think it's supposed to be fall of 27, so it's down the line, but it's not that far either. It's going to be fascinating. So 28%, my number of the week.
My number of the week is going to be 21. So in our last episode, we talked about a Léger post-election survey, and we talked about the different demographic groups, and we found that in the Léger survey, the Liberals had won the vote among older voters by not a very big margin. So we have another set of data from Abacus data, and I just wanted to balance things out with a different perspective here. And we saw that among voters over 60 or over, there was a 21-point swing towards the Liberals since the 2021 election. That, according to Abacus data, the Liberals won 49% of the vote among 60 and over, and the Conservatives won 38%. And that is a swing of 21 points from where they gauge things to be in 2021. So in this poll, we do see the same kind of patterns that we saw in a lot of late election surveys, that the Liberals were doing quite well among older voters. But even here, 11-point gap would be less than some of what we saw. And we see that more or less the swing between 18 to 29, between 2021 2025 was about the same. 45 to 59, not much movement. If the Liberals made gains among the 60 and over, the Conservatives made gains in the 30 to 44 age group. A net swing in their favor of 11 points. So this would be younger voters. And you know what? I bet you a lot of those kinds of voters who live in Brampton, in Vaughan, in York, and those areas that swung pretty hard to the Conservatives in the last election. So some interesting post-election data there from Abacus data. All right. That'll be it for this week's episode. If you've been watching and I've been looking at my camera, it's gotten very dark. I'm going to fix the lighting for next time. Don't worry. It'll be better. I'm still just adjusting to my new location. It's always a bit of an adjustment. And as I mentioned, we're going to have a special episode this week for Patreon members. It'll be out probably on Friday. We're going to do an NDP leadership draft. We're going to choose all those big names and find out who is going to be wrong the most. And we'll eventually do an accountability on that draft when it happens, whenever that'll be.
We'll see.
So if you want to listen to that and join the Patreon, join our Discord, you can go to thenumberspod.ca. And Philippe, I hope you have a good week, and we'll chat in 7 days. Well, actually, we're going to chat Thursday or Friday for that episode, but after that, we'll chat in a week.
Absolutely. Merci beaucoup, Eric. Merci beaucoup, tout le monde. Have a great week.